The silver blade pressed against Sarah's throat as she cradled her newborn, her own Alpha King standing in the hospital doorway, not as her mate's father, but as the executioner sent by the High Council. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over her daughter's soft whimpers. The baby's tiny fist curled around Sarah's finger, those impossible golden eyes now closed in innocent sleep. "She's yours, Damon. You know she's yours." Alpha King Damon Blackthorn's jaw tightened, his dark eyes cold as winter stone. The man who had once whispered promises against her skin now looked at her like she was nothing more than dirt beneath his boots. "The High Council has spoken, Sarah. There will be no false claims to the royal bloodline." 6 months ago, everything had been different. The Blood Moon Festival was the one night of the year when pack hierarchies dissolved like sugar in rain. Omega maids could dance with beta warriors. Low-ranking wolves could share drinks with those of noble blood. And sometimes, if the moon was generous, an Alpha King might notice a shy Omega with kind eyes and gentle hands. Sarah had been serving wine when Damon's gaze found her across the great hall. She'd nearly dropped the silver tray when he approached, his presence commanding even without his usual royal regalia. Under the crimson light of the blood moon, he'd looked younger, less burdened by the crown that would return to his head at sunrise. "Dance with me," he'd said simply, extending his hand. She should have said no. Should have remembered her place, her station, the impossible gulf between them. Instead, she'd placed her trembling fingers in his and let him lead her onto the dance floor. One dance became two. Two became walking in his private gardens. Walking became talking until dawn painted the sky pink, sharing stories and dreams they'd never told another soul. And when he'd kissed her beneath the dying blood moon, when he'd whispered her name like a prayer, she believed that maybe, just maybe, love could conquer the rigid laws of their pack. The spell had broken with the sunrise. By noon, Damon was back to being the untouchable Alpha King, and Sarah was just another Omega maid scrubbing floors and emptying chamber pots. He'd barely looked at her in the weeks that followed, though she'd caught him watching her sometimes when he thought no one would notice. Then she'd missed her heat. Then another. The nausea came next, followed by the subtle changes in her scent that any wolf with half a nose could detect. When she'd finally gathered the courage to tell him, to pull him aside after a formal dinner and whisper the truth with shaking lips, his reaction had been swift and brutal. "You're lying," he'd snarled, his alpha voice carrying across the hall and drawing stares from the other pack members. A desperate Omega seeking to elevate her station through false claims. "I've never touched you." The denial had hit her like a physical blow. Worse were the snickers and cruel whispers that followed as word spread through the pack. Delusional little Omega. Did she really think the Alpha King would want her? How pathetic, So she'd run. In the dead of night with nothing but the clothes on her back and what little money she'd saved, Sarah had fled to the human city where no one would know her scent, where she could hide her wolf and try to build some semblance of a life for herself and her unborn child. The human world was harsh in ways the pack lands weren't. No one cared that she was pregnant and alone. She'd worked double shifts at a diner until her ankles swelled so badly she could barely stand, then cleaning office buildings at night when her belly grew too large for the diner uniform. Her wolf had grown restless, caged and aching to run free, but Sarah had held her back through sheer willpower. The baby had come 3 weeks early, labor pains striking her in the middle of her shift at the 24-hour laundromat. She'd barely made it to the charity hospital before her daughter decided to make her entrance into the world. Sarah had expected many things about childbirth, the pain, the exhaustion, the overwhelming love that crashed over her the moment she held her baby. What she hadn't expected were the gasps from the medical staff when her daughter opened her eyes. Pure gold. Not the amber-flecked brown of most werewolves, not even the bright yellow of a strong alpha. Pure, molten gold that seemed to glow with inner light. "Get Dr. Morrison," one of the nurses had whispered urgently. "And call the Supernatural Registry. We have a Code 7. Code 7. Sarah's blood had turned to ice. She'd heard whispers of such classifications, anomalies that required immediate reporting to the supernatural authorities. Her exhausted body had screamed in protest, but she'd forced herself to sit up, clutching her baby closer. "There's no anomaly," she'd insisted, but her voice had cracked with fear. "She's perfectly normal." The doctor, Dr. Morrison, apparently, had given her a sympathetic look. "I'm sorry, miss, but those eyes. I've delivered hundreds of werewolf babies, and I've never seen anything like this. We have to report it. It's the law." Sarah had tried to run then, stumbling from the hospital bed on unsteady legs with her baby wrapped in a stolen blanket. But she'd barely made it to the elevator before security found her. They'd been gentle but firm, guiding her back to her room while assuring her that everything would be fine. Everything was not fine. Now, 18 hours after her daughter's birth, Alpha King Damon Blackthorne stood in her hospital room with silver in his hand and murder in his eyes. "The High Council doesn't take false claims lightly, Sarah," he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "Especially ones involving impossible bloodlines." "Look at her," Sarah pleaded, tilting the baby so he could see her face. "Look at her eyes and tell me she isn't yours. Tell me you don't recognize your own daughter." For just a moment, a heartbeat, a breath, something flickered in Damon's expression. His nostrils flared slightly, taking in the baby's scent, and his hand trembled almost imperceptibly. But then his features hardened again, the brief crack in his armor sealing shut. "Royal blood doesn't run in the veins of Omega bastards," he said coldly. "The council has decided this charade ends here." The silver blade pressed closer to her throat, and Sarah felt a thin line of blood trickle down her neck. Her daughter stirred in her arms, those impossible golden eyes opening to stare up at the man who should have been her protector, not her executioner. "Damon," Sarah whispered one last time, putting everything she had left into his name. "Please. She's innocent." Alpha King Damon Blackthorne raised the blade, his face a mask of cold duty, and Sarah closed her eyes as she held her daughter close. She thought of blood moons and whispered promises, of a night when love had seemed possible between an Alpha King and an Omega Maid. Her last thought before the silver sang through the air was that her daughter's eyes burned as bright as the stars. Chapter 2. Damon's hand froze mid-strike, the silver blade trembling in his grip as those impossible golden eyes stared up at him. Not just golden, exactly the shade of molten amber that had belonged to his father, the legendary Alpha King Magnus Blackthorne, who had united 7 warring packs under one banner. The blade clattered to the floor. "My lord?" Commander Thorne's voice cut through the sudden silence, confusion evident in his tone. The High Council's enforcer stepped forward, his own silver weapon at the ready. "Is there a problem?" Damon's mind raced even as his body remained frozen. The 3 council warriors behind him wouldn't understand that the child they'd been sent to eliminate carried royal Blackthorne blood. To them, this was just another false claimant to be dealt with swiftly and quietly. The child," Damon managed, his voice hoarse. "Let me examine it first. We need to be certain before we act." Sarah's arms tightened protectively around her baby, tears streaming down her face as she pressed back against the hospital bed's headboard. "Please," she whispered. "Don't hurt him. Him. Their son." Damon felt something crack inside his chest as he looked down at the tiny life he'd helped create. The baby's eyes tracked his movement with an intelligence that seemed impossible for someone barely a day old. Those eyes, his father's eyes, staring up at him with complete trust. "Stand aside, my lord," Commander Thorne said impatiently. The High Council's orders were clear. No examination necessary, just swift elimination of the threat. "I said I'll examine the child first." Damon's alpha voice rang with unmistakable authority, causing all 3 warriors to step back automatically. "You forget your place, Commander." Before anyone could respond further, the hospital room door burst open. A woman with wild silver hair and mismatched eyes, one blue, one green, stumbled inside, her clothes disheveled and her breathing labored as if she'd run the entire way. "Sarah." The newcomer's gaze swept the room, taking in the armed warriors, the silver blade on the floor, and Sarah cowering with her baby. Power crackled around her, not just wolf, but something else. Something older. "Step away from her. Now." "Zara?" Sarah's voice broke with relief and confusion. How did you? What are you doing here? Commander Thorne's lip curled in disgust. A witch-wolf hybrid. How fitting that the lying Omega surrounds herself with other abominations. Zara's mismatched eyes flashed dangerously. I'd watch my tongue if I were you, council dog. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Zara, please, Sarah pleaded, clutching her son closer. Just go. I don't want you getting hurt because of me. Because of you? Zara laughed, but there was no humor in it. Sweet Sarah, you still don't understand, do you? After all these years of friendship, all the signs I had to hide? She turned to face the room, her hybrid power making the air itself seem to vibrate. This woman isn't just some Omega maid. She's... Choose your next words carefully, hybrid, Damon interrupted, sensing where this was heading. If Zara revealed Sarah's true heritage now, in front of the council warriors, it would complicate everything beyond repair. But Zara ignored his warning, her gaze fixed on her friend. Sarah, your parents didn't die in a rogue attack when you were 5. They were murdered. Assassinated by order of the High Council because your father refused to bow to their corruption. The words hit the room like a physical blow. Sarah's face went white, and even Commander Thorne stepped back in surprise. That's impossible, Sarah whispered. I'm nobody. I'm just... You're Seraphina Silvermoon, Zara said softly. Daughter of Alpha King Lysander Silvermoon and Luna Queen Celestine. The Silver Moon Pack's lost heir. The silence that followed was deafening. Damon felt the blood drain from his face as the implications crashed over him. The Silver Moon Pack had once been the most powerful of all the Northern Territories before their sudden, brutal end 15 years ago. If Sarah was truly Lysander's daughter. The Silver Moon bloodline was eliminated, Commander Thorne said slowly, but uncertainty crept into his voice. There were no survivors. One survivor, Zara corrected. A 5-year-old girl who was smuggled away by a loyal beta before the massacre. A girl whose memories were suppressed by hybrid magic to protect her from those who would finish what they started. Her mismatched eyes found Damon's. A girl who grew up believing she was powerless, never knowing that alpha blood ran through her veins. Sarah's breathing became shallow and rapid. No. No, that's not. I would remember. I would know if I was. Your son's eyes, Zara said gently. Tell me, Sarah, what do you see when you look at them? They're golden, Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. Pure gold, like. She trailed off, her gaze snapping to Damon with sudden understanding. Like your father's, Zara finished. Alpha King Lysander's eyes were legendary, molten gold that could command any wolf with a single glance. And now his grandson carries that same gift. Damon's heart hammered against his ribs. Not just royal Blackthorn blood, then. Their son carried the combined heritage of 2 of the most powerful alpha bloodlines in history. The child in Sarah's arms wasn't just his heir, he was potentially the most powerful alpha born in generations. Fascinating, a new voice drawled from the doorway, cultured and dripping with false sweetness. Though I do hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Every wolf in the room tensed as Alpha Princess Vivian Stormcrest glided into the hospital room like a predator scenting blood. Her platinum blonde hair was pulled back in a severe chignon, and her ice blue eyes missed nothing as they swept the scene before her. She wore a pristine white suit that probably cost more than most wolves made in a year, and her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Vivian, Damon said carefully, inclining his head the precise amount protocol demanded. I wasn't expecting you. Clearly. Her smile widened as she took in the silver blade on the floor, the terrified Omega clutching her baby, and the witch-wolf hybrid crackling with barely contained power. Though I must say, this is far more entertaining than the council meeting I just left. Something about eliminating false claimants to royal bloodlines? Commander Thorne straightened. Princess Stormcrest. We have the situation well in hand. Do you? Vivian's laugh was like wind chimes made of ice. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're allowing a known hybrid to interfere with council business. Her gaze fixed on Zara with predatory interest. How irregular. The hybrid was just leaving, Damon said quickly, but Vivian held up one perfectly manicured hand to stop him. Oh, but I insist she stay. After all, her little story about the Silver Moon bloodline is absolutely fascinating. Vivian's eyes glittered as she studied Sarah with new interest. Tell me, Commander, what exactly did the Council's genealogists conclude about this Omega's heritage? Commander Thorne shifted uncomfortably. The initial assessment suggested she was a common Omega, princess. But if the hybrid speaks truthfully, then we have a problem, Vivian finished smoothly. She began to circle the hospital bed like a shark, her heels clicking against the linoleum. You see, the Silver Moon Pack's elimination was necessary for the stability of our kind. Alpha King Lysander and his queen were dangerous idealists who would have disrupted the natural order of things. Sarah's grip tightened on her son as understanding dawned in her eyes. You knew. You knew who I was. Not you specifically, darling, Vivian said with false sympathy. But the Council has been searching for any Silver Moon survivors for years. Loose ends, you understand. Can't have them popping up to challenge the established hierarchy. Her smile turned predatory as her gaze fell on the baby. Especially not ones carrying such unusual gifts. The baby, Kieran, Sarah had called him, stirred in his mother's arms, those golden eyes opening to stare directly at Vivian. For just a moment, the princess's composed mask slipped, revealing something like hunger beneath. Such extraordinary eyes, she murmured, leaning closer. They almost seemed to glow with their own light. How very convenient that such a child should be born to a supposedly powerless Omega. Convenient? Zara snarled, power flaring around her like heat waves. This child is innocent. He's done nothing to deserve. He exists, Vivian cut her off coldly. And his existence threatens the stability my family has worked centuries to build. The Stormcrest line has ruled the Eastern Territory since the Great Unification, and we don't intend to lose that position to some bastard child with pretty eyes. Damon felt his control slipping as fury built in his chest. This was his son Vivian was discussing like a problem to be solved, his mate she was threatening with casual cruelty. But he forced himself to remain still, to keep his expression neutral. If he revealed the truth now, if he admitted his connection to Sarah and their child. The child's parentage remains unconfirmed, he said carefully. Perhaps we should return him to council custody for proper evaluation before making any rash decisions. Vivian's laugh was sharp as broken glass. Oh, Damon. Sweet, noble Damon. Always trying to do the right thing, even when it's not in your best interest. She turned that ice-blue gaze on him with something that might have been pity. Did you really think I wouldn't notice the way you looked at her? The way your scent changed the moment you saw that child? Damon's blood turned to ice. I don't know what you're implying. Don't you? Vivian's smile was triumphant now. Your wolf recognizes what your mind refuses to accept. That child carries Blackthorn blood, your blood. Combined with Silver Moon heritage, he's exactly the kind of threat the Council was designed to eliminate. Commander Thorne stepped forward, confusion evident in his scarred features. Princess, are you suggesting that Alpha King Damon is the child's father? I'm not suggesting anything, Vivian said smoothly. I'm stating a fact. Our beloved Alpha King has been keeping secrets, haven't you, darling? Her gaze never left Damon's face. Tell me, how long have you been protecting your little Omega and her royal bastard? The room erupted in tension. Commander Thorne's hand moved to his silver blade while the other two council warriors flanked him, their faces grim with understanding. Zara's hybrid power crackled more violently, and Sarah pressed herself further against the headboard, clutching Kieran with desperate strength. Even if what you're implying were true, Damon said carefully, his alpha voice steady despite the chaos around him, the child is still innocent. Surely the Council. The Council cares nothing for innocence when the stability of our entire social structure is at stake, Vivian interrupted. A child with both Blackthorn and Silver Moon blood? Do you have any idea what that could mean for the balance of power among the packs? She gestured elegantly to Commander Thorne. Kill them both. The Omega and her bastard. Make it look like complications from childbirth. These human hospitals are so unreliable. No. The word tore from Damon's throat before he could stop it, his careful control finally shattering. Power rolled off him in waves, causing every wolf in the room to stagger back a step. You will not touch them. Vivian's smile was victorious. There it is. The truth at last. She tilted her head, studying him like a fascinating specimen. How long, Damon? How long have you been lying to the council, to me, to everyone? Damon moved to place himself between Vivian and the bed, his body a shield between his mate and child and the threats surrounding them. Since the moment I realized what they meant to me. How romantic, Vivian said dryly. And how utterly foolish. Did you really think you could hide a child with eyes like that? Did you think the council would simply overlook such a glaring threat to everything we've built? Behind him, Damon could hear Sarah's ragged breathing, could smell her fear and desperation. His son's soft whimpers cut through him like silver blades, and something primitive and protective roared to life in his chest. I won't let you harm them, he said, his voice carrying the full weight of his alpha authority. You won't let me? Vivian's eyebrows rose in mock surprise. Oh, my dear fiancé, I think you've forgotten something very important. She gestured to the council warriors, who had their weapons drawn and ready. You're outnumbered. And more importantly, you're a traitor to your own kind. Commander Thorne's face was granite hard with duty. Alpha King Damon Blackthorne, by order of the High Council, you are under arrest for conspiracy, deception, and willful endangerment of pack security. Your Omega and her child are to be executed immediately. The silver blades gleamed in the harsh hospital lighting as the warriors advanced. Zara's power flared, but she was one hybrid against 3 council enforcers. Sarah's terrified whimpers filled the air as she clutched their son, and Damon could see his whole world about to be destroyed by the very institution he'd sworn to serve. Vivian's voice cut through the tension like silk over steel. Choose carefully, Damon. Your throne, your duty, your carefully built reputation, or one Omega and her bastard child. What's it going to be? Chapter 3. The silver blade was inches from Kieran's tiny chest when something inside Sarah snapped. Not broke, snapped like a chain that had been wrapped around her soul for 15 years, binding down a power so vast and ancient that its sudden release sent shockwaves through every supernatural being within a 5-mile radius. The hospital room exploded into chaos as Sarah's wolf erupted from her human skin in a burst of silver light. But this wasn't the weak, cowering Omega wolf everyone expected. This creature was magnificent and terrifying, silver-white fur that seemed to capture and reflect moonlight that wasn't there, standing nearly as tall as a man at the shoulder, with eyes like liquid starlight that burned with otherworldly power. An Alpha Supreme. The rarest of all werewolf bloodlines, thought extinct for over a century. Commander Thorne stumbled backward, his silver blade clattering to the floor as primal terror overrode his training. Impossible, he breathed. The supreme bloodlines were wiped out. Sarah's wolf snarled, a sound that made the windows rattle and sent ice through every person's veins. She moved with fluid grace despite her recent childbirth, placing herself between the threats and the bed where Kieran lay crying. Power rolled off her in waves, causing the electronic equipment to spark and flicker. Stand down. Vivian commanded, but her voice cracked with fear she couldn't quite hide. She's still wounded from giving birth, she can't maintain that form for long. As if to prove her point, Sarah's legs trembled, and blood began to seep through her silver fur. Years of magical suppression had atrophied her shifting abilities, and the sudden forced transformation was tearing her body apart from the inside. But she held her position, starlight eyes fixed on the council warriors with deadly intent. Sarah, stop! Zara cried out, her hybrid power flaring as she tried to stabilize her friend. You're killing yourself. The massive silver wolf's head turned toward Kieran's cries, and something heartbreakingly human flickered in those otherworldly eyes. She tried to shift back, to return to her human form so she could comfort her son, but the suppression magic fought against her, creating a violent internal battle that left her gasping and shaking. That's when Damon moved. He crossed the room in 3 swift strides, placing himself directly in front of Sarah's wolf form and spreading his arms wide to shield both her and their child from the council warriors. His own power unfurled, not as overwhelming as Sarah's, but steady and commanding, the authority of a born alpha king. "I am Kieran's father," he declared, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "He is my blood, my heir, and under my protection. Anyone who threatens him threatens the crown itself." The silence that followed was deafening. Commander Thorne's face went ash-gray as the implications crashed over him. They hadn't come to eliminate a false claimant. They'd been sent to murder the Alpha King's legitimate heir. "You fool," Vivian hissed, her composure finally cracking. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" "I've claimed my son," Damon replied calmly, though his muscles remained coiled for action. Behind him, Sarah was struggling to maintain her wolf form, her silver fur now stained with her own blood. "And I'm protecting my mate." "Your mate?" Vivian's voice rose to a near shriek. "She's a fraud. A nobody Omega who?" "She's no Omega." The new voice cut through Vivian's tirade like a blade through silk. Every head turned toward the doorway where an elderly man stood, his presence somehow commanding despite his frail appearance. Elder Aldrich Ravenclaw, the High Council's most senior member, looked like someone's kindly grandfather with his snow-white hair and gentle smile. Only his eyes betrayed the predator beneath, cold, calculating, and utterly without mercy. "Elder Aldrich," Damon said carefully, not moving from his protective stance. "We weren't expecting the council so soon." "No, I imagine you weren't." Aldrich stepped into the room, followed by 2 more council enforcers who positioned themselves by the door. "Though I must say, this situation has developed far beyond even my expectations." His gaze fell on Sarah's trembling wolf form with something that might have been admiration. "Hello, Celine. It's been a long time." The name hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her wolf form wavered, silver light flickering as memories tried to claw their way to the surface of her mind. Images flashed, a man with gentle eyes and silver hair, a woman with a laugh like wind chimes, a grand palace with moonstone spires reaching toward the sky. "That's not her name," Zara snarled, but uncertainty crept into her voice. "Isn't it?" Aldrich smiled benignly. "Tell me, child, what do you remember of your 5th birthday? The last birthday you celebrated before your parents' unfortunate accident?" Sarah's wolf form shuddered, and she began to shift back against her will, her body too damaged to maintain the transformation. As her human form solidified, she collapsed to her knees beside the hospital bed, reaching up with shaking hands to touch her crying son. "I remember." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Moonstone. Everywhere, moonstone that sang when I touched it. And a man in dark robes who came to see Papa late at night. A man who smelled like death and lies." Aldrich's smile widened. "Very good. Your memories are returning faster than I anticipated. Though I suspect that's due to your son's remarkable heritage. The combined bloodlines are calling to each other, breaking down the barriers I so carefully constructed." "Barriers?" Damon's voice was dangerous. "What did you do to her?" "What was necessary," Aldrich replied smoothly. "You see, young king, there was a prophecy made at Celine's birth. When Silver Moon meets Obsidian Crown, the Wolf Kingdom shall bow to their son. Rather inconvenient for those of us who prefer the current power structure." Vivian's face had gone white as understanding dawned. "The prophecy, you mean she's actually Celine Silvermoon, daughter of Alpha King Lysander and Luna Queen Celestine, heir to the most powerful bloodline in werewolf history." Aldrich's tone was conversational, as if he were discussing the weather. "And now, it seems, the mother of a child who carries both Silver Moon and Blackthorn blood. The prophecy fulfilled at last." Sarah's memories were rushing back now, 15 years of suppression crumbling like a dam bursting. She saw her father's face clearly for the first time since childhood, not the vague, dreamlike figure she'd sometimes glimpsed, but the proud Alpha King who had ruled with wisdom and compassion. She remembered her mother's voice singing lullabies that made flowers bloom and stars shine brighter. And she remembered the night it all ended, screams, silver blades, and a 5-year-old girl being hustled away by loyal guards while her parents died to protect an ancient secret. The Moonstone Scepter, she breathed, the words falling from her lips without conscious thought. You killed them for it. I killed them to prevent the prophecy, Aldrich corrected gently. The scepter was simply a bonus, though one I've never been able to claim, thanks to your father's foresight in hiding it. His eyes glittered with avarice and frustration. 15 years I've searched for it. 15 years of carefully orchestrated political maneuvering to ensure that even if you survived, you'd never be in a position to fulfill your destiny. By suppressing her wolf, Zara said, pieces clicking into place. By making her believe she was powerless. By making everyone believe it, Aldrich agreed. A simple Omega Maid posed no threat to anyone. I arranged for her placement in Damon's household specifically to monitor her. I certainly never expected the two of them to actually fall in love. His gaze shifted to Damon with something like disappointment. Your betrothal to Princess Vivian was supposed to prevent exactly this scenario. Vivian's laugh was brittle with hysteria. You orchestrated everything. The festival, their meeting, even this moment, it was all part of your game. Not this moment, Aldrich admitted. I had hoped to eliminate the problem quietly before it could develop. But sometimes even the best-laid plans require adjustment. He gestured to one of his enforcers, who stepped forward with silver shackles. The child, if you please. No. Sarah lurched to her feet, her maternal instincts overriding her physical weakness. But she was still too damaged from her forced shift, and she stumbled before she could reach Kieran. Damon moved to catch her, his strong arms wrapping around her waist to support her weight. The contact sent sparks through both of them, not just physical attraction, but something deeper. The mate bond that had been forming during their night under the blood moon suddenly blazed to life with startling intensity, strengthened by their shared parenthood and the truth finally laid bare between them. Touch my son and die, Damon snarled, his alpha power flaring as he pulled Sarah against his chest. Your son who represents the fulfillment of a prophecy that could destroy the carefully balanced political structure of our entire species, Aldrich replied calmly. I think not. He nodded to his enforcer, who moved toward the hospital bed where Kieran lay crying, his golden eyes reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights. That's when Sarah's memories finally, fully returned. She wasn't Sarah the Omega Maid. She was Selene Silvermoon, heir to the Alpha Supreme bloodline, daughter of murdered royalty, and the guardian of secrets that could reshape the werewolf world. She remembered her father teaching her to commune with Moonstone, her mother showing her how to call upon the ancient magics that flowed through Silver Moon blood. And she remembered the night before her parents died, when they had pressed a small pendant into her hands and whispered urgent instructions she was too young to fully understand. The scepter isn't hidden, she said suddenly, her voice stronger now despite her physical weakness. It was destroyed. Aldrich froze, his hand halfway to Kieran. Impossible. The Moonstone Scepter is indestructible. It's been. It was broken into 7 pieces and scattered across the territories, Selene continued, the memories flowing freely now. My father knew you would come for it eventually. He made sure you'd never be able to use its power to subjugate the packs. She smiled, and for the first time in 15 years, it was the smile of a queen. 1 piece was hidden with each of the great packs. The 7th was given to me. Her hand went to her throat, where a thin silver chain disappeared beneath her hospital gown. She'd worn it for 15 years without understanding its significance, a small pendant she'd assumed was a childhood trinket, nothing more. Aldrich's composed mask finally cracked, revealing the greedy, power-hungry creature beneath. You've had it all along. You've been carrying a fragment of the most powerful artifact in werewolf history and you didn't even know it. I know it now, Selene said quietly. And I remember what my father told me before he died. When the moon rises blood red and silver light burns away the darkness, the scattered pieces will call to their home. The prophecy wasn't just about my son's birth, was it? It was about the scepter's reunification. Which is why you must all die. Aldrich's veneer of civility vanished completely. The child, the prophecy, the bloodlines, all of it ends here. He gestured sharply to his enforcers. Kill them all. We'll sort out the political ramifications later. But as the council warriors moved to obey, Kieran's cries suddenly changed pitch. The golden-eyed baby's voice rose in something that wasn't quite a wail and wasn't quite a howl, something that resonated with power older than the council, older than the modern pack structure, older than recorded werewolf history. The pendant at Celine's throat began to glow with soft silver light, responding to her son's call. And somewhere in the distance, as if answering across impossible miles, 6 other pieces of an ancient artifact began to sing with harmonious power. The blood moon prophecy was beginning to fulfill itself at last. Take the child, Aldrich commanded desperately, his careful plans crumbling around him. Whatever happens, we need the child. Chapter 4. The soulmate bond, Zara whispered urgently as Aldrich's enforcers closed in. It's the only way, Sarah. You and Damon need to combine your powers if you have any hope of protecting Kieran. Celine's heart hammered against her ribs. The soulmate bond was forbidden for good reason. The ancient ritual that permanently merged 2 alpha souls could create unprecedented power, but it could just as easily destroy both participants if their hearts weren't perfectly aligned. One shadow of doubt, one moment of hesitation, and they would both burn from the inside out. We barely know each other, she breathed, even as Damon's arms tightened protectively around her. How can we? Look at me, Damon commanded, his voice cutting through her panic. When her starlight eyes met his dark ones, she saw no fear, no uncertainty. Only absolute, unwavering certainty. I've known you were mine since the moment we danced under the blood moon. Everything else was just politics and lies. Aldrich's enforcer lunged toward Kieran's bed, silver blade gleaming. Without conscious thought, Celine and Damon moved in perfect synchronization, their hands clasping as power erupted from their joined souls. The ritual began without words, without ceremony, just 2 hearts recognizing their perfect match and choosing to become something greater than either could be alone. Pain lanced through Celine's body as memories flooded back with stunning clarity. Not just her own memories now, but ancestral knowledge flowing through her bloodline like liquid moonlight. She saw herself at age 4, small hands glowing with silver light as she touched the completed moonstone scepter for the first time. She saw her father's face, grave with desperate love, as he pressed something into her tiny palm the night before he died. The Brooklyn Bridge, she gasped, the words torn from her throat as the vision crystallized. I hid it in the human realm, beneath the Brooklyn Bridge in a vault my father created. The humans think it's just old infrastructure, but it's protected by silver moon magic. The scepter, Aldrich snarled, his composure completely shattered now. You hid the most powerful artifact in supernatural history in the human world? Where power-hungry monsters like you would never think to look, Celine replied, her voice growing stronger as the bond with Damon deepened. She could feel his memories too, his loneliness, his sense of duty warring with his heart, and underneath it all, the bone-deep recognition he'd felt the moment he'd seen her across that crowded hall. The ritual was working. Power coursed between them like liquid lightning, and for the first time in 15 years, Celine felt truly whole. Her Alpha Supreme abilities awakened fully, no longer suppressed by years of magical bindings, while Damon's own considerable power amplified and refined under the influence of her ancient bloodline. Stop them. Aldrich commanded, but his enforcers hesitated. The energy radiating from the bonded pair was unlike anything they'd ever encountered, not the brutal dominance of typical alpha power, but something far older and more fundamental. The power to protect, to nurture, to lead through love rather than fear. You can't stop the ritual now, Vivian said coldly, and Celine was shocked to see her former rival smiling. But you don't need to. Let them complete their precious bond, it will make killing them all the sweeter. Vivian? Damon's voice carried genuine confusion and hurt. We've known each other since childhood. Surely you don't. I've been Aldrich's creature since birth, Vivian cut him off, her ice-blue eyes glittering with malice. My parents died when I was 3, killed by Silver Moon loyalists, or so I was told. Aldrich raised me, shaped me, turned me into the perfect weapon to keep you isolated and controllable." Her laugh was bitter as broken glass. "Did you really think it was coincidence that the council arranged our betrothal just months after you came of age? Everything was designed to prevent you from finding your true mate." The betrayal hit Damon like a physical blow, but the bond with Celine cushioned the pain, transforming it into something he could bear. "All those years," he said quietly. "All those conversations about duty and the future of our packs. All lies," Vivian confirmed. "Though I must admit, it stung a bit when you started mooning over your little Omega Maid. I actually began to care for you, despite everything. Such an inconvenient development." "I hereby break our betrothal," Damon said formally, his alpha voice carrying the weight of law. "The Stormcrest Blackthorn alliance is dissolved. And I hereby declare war on your pathetic kingdom," Vivian replied sweetly. "The Stormcrest pack will not suffer the insult of a broken betrothal, especially not for some Omega pretender and her bastard child." The hospital room erupted into chaos. Vivian's hidden guards burst through the windows, silver weapons gleaming, while Aldrich's enforcers pressed their attack. But Celine and Damon were ready for them now, their powers fully merged through the completed bond. They fought as one being with two bodies, predicting each other's movements with supernatural precision. Celine's Alpha Supreme abilities had awakened something in Damon too, his own bloodline reaching back to trace ancient connections, revealing that the Blackthorn line carried traces of the original Alpha Supreme heritage, diluted by generations but still present. "The alignment," Zara shouted over the sounds of battle, pointing toward the hospital windows where the night sky was beginning to change. "It's starting." Celine looked up and gasped. The moon was shifting color, turning from silver to deep crimson as a rare celestial alignment began. During such events, werewolf powers were amplified tenfold, which meant both their own abilities and those of their enemies would reach unprecedented levels. "We need to get to the scepter," she told Damon through their bond, the words flowing directly from her mind to his. "If Aldrich gets his hands on it during the alignment, he'll have enough power to enslave every supernatural creature on Earth." "Then we go," Damon replied the same way, their mental connection as clear as spoken words. "All of us." He scooped Kieran from his hospital bed, their son's golden eyes wide but unafraid as he looked up at his father. The baby seemed to sense the power flowing around him, reaching tiny fists toward the red moon visible through the window. That's when something extraordinary happened. Kieran's presence acted like a catalyst, and the pendant at Celine's throat blazed with sudden brilliance. The silver light poured out in waves, washing over every person in the room, and where it touched the suppressed wolves among Aldrich's forces, their true natures began to emerge. "What is this?" one of the enforcers gasped, his voice changing as his carefully conditioned submission cracked. "I can feel. I remember." "He's awakening them," Celine breathed in wonder. "Kieran isn't just an heir, he's the bridge walker from the oldest prophecies. The one who can unite all the scattered pieces of our world." More enforcers were beginning to remember who they'd been before the council's conditioning. These weren't naturally cruel wolves, they were suppressed alphas and betas who'd been brainwashed into serving a corrupt system. As Kieran's influence spread, their true personalities began to reassert themselves. "Impossible," Aldrich snarled, but fear was creeping into his voice. "The child is barely 2 days old. He can't possibly have that kind of power. He's the son of 2 Alpha Supreme bloodlines during a celestial alignment," Celine said, her voice ringing with ancient authority. "He has exactly that kind of power." Zara was already opening a portal, her hybrid magic enhanced by the crimson moonlight streaming through the windows. "Brooklyn Bridge, here we come. But we need to move fast, the alignment only lasts an hour." They raced through the shimmering gateway, leaving the chaos of the hospital behind. But Aldrich and Vivian were right behind them, their own forces following through before the portal could close. The Brooklyn Bridge at midnight during a celestial alignment was a sight to behold. The ancient stones hummed with power, and Celine could feel the scepter's presence like a beacon calling to her blood. The vault her father had created was hidden in plain sight, disguised as routine bridge infrastructure, but pulsing with silver moon magic that made her teeth ache. "There," she pointed to what looked like an ordinary maintenance hatch. But when she pressed her hand against it, the metal dissolved like mist, revealing a chamber filled with moonstone that sang with harmonious power. The moonstone scepter hung suspended in the center of the vault, 7 fragments orbiting each other in perfect synchronization. It was beautiful beyond description, silver and white crystal that seemed to contain captured starlight, pulsing with the rhythm of a cosmic heartbeat. At last, Aldrich breathed, his eyes fixed on the artifact with naked hunger. Do you know what that can do? With the scepter's power, I can reshape the entire supernatural world. No more messy pack politics, no more competing bloodlines, just perfect order under my rule. Your rule was built on lies and murder, Celine said, stepping protectively in front of the vault. It ends here. Does it? Vivian's voice was silk over steel as she emerged from the shadows, flanked by Stormcrest warriors. Because I think you'll find we have some advantages you don't. The battle that followed would be spoken of in whispers for generations. 2 Alpha Supreme bloodlines bonded in love against the corrupted remnants of the old order, fighting while the Crimson Moon reached its zenith and amplified every spark of power tenfold. But as they fought, something unexpected happened. Kieran's presence continued to awaken the suppressed wolves around them, and one by one, Aldrich's forces began to turn. These were good wolves who had been twisted by lies and magical conditioning, and with their true natures restored, they remembered what they'd really been fighting for all along. This is impossible, Aldrich gasped as his own enforcers turned against him. You're all under my control. You swore binding oaths. Oaths extracted under false pretenses aren't binding, one of the former enforcers said quietly. We remember who we really are now, thanks to the child. We remember what you made us forget. The tide was turning, but Vivian wasn't finished. Even if you defeat us, she snarled, do you think the human world will simply accept supernatural creatures living among them openly? We have allies in their government, agencies that have been waiting for an excuse to eliminate all of us. Then it's a good thing Kieran isn't just the bridge walker for supernatural creatures, Celine said, her starlight eyes fixed on her son with wonder. The baby was glowing with soft silver light, and that radiance was spreading outward through the very air itself. He's the bridge between all worlds, supernatural and human alike. The prophecy spoke of unity, Damon added, his own understanding growing as he watched their son work his impossible magic. Not subjugation, not control, unity. Kieran can help humans and supernatural creatures coexist as equals. The light from the baby reached the hidden human observers, government agents who had been watching from the shadows, waiting to see how this supernatural conflict would play out. But instead of fear or aggression, their faces showed wonder and understanding as ancient prejudices dissolved under Kieran's influence. He's showing them the truth, one of the agents said in amazement. All the fear, all the hatred, it was based on lies and misunderstandings. We're not so different after all. Aldrich made one last desperate play for the scepter, but Celine was ready for him. The artifact responded to her bloodline's call, the 7 fragments rushing together to form the complete Moonstone scepter for the first time in 15 years. Power flowed through her like liquid moonlight as she grasped the ancient weapon, but instead of using it to destroy her enemies, she did something that shocked everyone present. She shattered it again. What are you doing? Aldrich screamed as the fragments scattered, but this time they didn't fly away to hidden vaults. Instead, they dissolved into motes of silver light that flowed outward, touching every supernatural creature present and awakening their true potential. Creating a new world, Celine said simply. The scepter was never meant to be a weapon of control. It was meant to awaken the best in all of us, to help us remember that strength comes from unity, not dominance. The transformation that followed rippled outward from the bridge like a stone thrown into still water. Across the werewolf territories, suppressed omegas felt their true natures awakening. Corrupted alphas remembered what it meant to lead with compassion rather than fear. The rigid hierarchy that had kept their people divided for centuries began to crumble, replaced by something based on character and choice rather than accident of birth. Aldrich's defeat was almost anticlimactic after that. Stripped of his stolen power and faced with the wolves he'd manipulated for so long, he simply collapsed. The conspiracy he'd built over decades fell apart in minutes as his victims remembered the truth and chose freedom over fear. It's over, Damon said softly, pulling Celine and Kieran into his arms as the crimson moon began to fade back to silver. The old world is gone. And a new one begins, Celine agreed, watching as humans and supernatural creatures tentatively approached each other without fear for the first time in recorded history. They ruled as equal partners after that, king and queen, alpha and alpha supreme, parents to the child who would grow up to be the bridge between worlds. The pack hierarchies didn't disappear overnight, but they evolved, becoming something based on merit and choice rather than the circumstances of birth. Celine established sanctuaries for wolves who had been suppressed or abused by the old system, while Damon reformed the ancient laws to protect the vulnerable rather than empowering the cruel. Together, they proved that love really could conquer political manipulation, and that sometimes the most powerful magic was simply treating people with dignity and respect. 2 years later. Kieran, come back here before you portal yourself into the middle of traffic, Celine called, laughing as her 2-year-old son giggled and wobbled toward the busy street outside their sanctuary. His eyes still blazed with that impossible golden light, but now they sparkled with mischief as well. He's going to be a handful when he's older, Damon observed, scooping up their son before he could accidentally open another dimensional gateway. At 2, Kieran was already showing unprecedented magical abilities, not just werewolf powers, but something that transcended the boundaries between species entirely. Look, Mama, Kieran said proudly, pointing to where a group of human children were playing with young werewolf pups in the sanctuary's garden. Friends. Celine smiled, her heart full as she watched the scene that would have been impossible just 2 years ago. The integration wasn't always smooth, there were still those on both sides who resisted change, but slowly, carefully, the two worlds were learning to coexist. Yes, sweetheart, she said, taking her son from Damon's arms. Friends. That's what we're all learning to be. The future stretched out before them, bright with possibility. There would be challenges ahead, certainly, old prejudices died hard, and not everyone was ready to embrace the new world Kieran's birth had made possible. But for the first time in centuries, supernatural creatures and humans were choosing cooperation over conflict, understanding over fear. And at the center of it all was a little boy with golden eyes and his parents who had proved that love, real, honest, unconditional love, was the most powerful magic of all. The moon shone silver and bright above them, no longer blood-red with conflict but peaceful and eternal, watching over a world learning to heal. Epilogue. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Silvermoon Sanctuary, casting warm golden light across the breakfast room where controlled chaos reigned supreme. 5-year-old Kieran sat at the head of the long oak table, his golden eyes bright with concentration as he attempted to levitate his pancakes while simultaneously explaining quantum physics to his stuffed wolf, Mr. Patches. You see, Mr. Patches, Kieran said seriously, his small face scrunched in thought, if I can make the pancakes float in this dimension, then theoretically they should also exist in the parallel dimension where they're already in my tummy. Kieran Alexander Blackthorn Silvermoon, Celine said with barely contained laughter, eat your breakfast like a normal 5-year-old, please. But Mama, normal is boring, Kieran protested, finally giving up on the levitation and taking a proper bite. Besides, Mrs. Chen says I'm gifted and should explore my abilities. Dr. Sarah Chen, the human child psychologist who specialized in supernatural children, had indeed said that, though probably not quite in those terms. The integration of human and supernatural societies had led to new professions, new challenges, and new joys that none of them had anticipated. Your abilities include eating with utensils, Damon said dryly, entering the breakfast room with their 18-month-old daughter Luna perched on his shoulders. The toddler squealed with delight as she spotted her brother, her own eyes, a striking violet that seemed to shift between Celine's starlight's silver and Damon's deep brown, sparkling with mischief. Kiki. Luna babbled, reaching toward her brother with chubby arms. Up. Up. Luna wants to fly too, Kieran announced, abandoning his pancakes to help lift his sister from their father's shoulders. The moment his hands touched hers, both children began to glow with soft light, Kieran's golden, Luna's violet, and they rose gently into the air, giggling as they spun in slow circles. And this is why we can't have nice things, Celine muttered, but her eyes were warm with love as she watched her children float around the breakfast room like tiny, adorable weather systems. Actually, I think this counts as a very nice thing, Damon said, wrapping his arms around his wife's waist and nuzzling her neck. Even after 5 years, the mate bond between them hummed with contentment and deep, abiding love. "Remember when you used to think you were nobody special? I remember when you thought duty was more important than love," Celine countered, leaning back against his solid warmth. "Look how wrong we both were." Their quiet moment was interrupted by a gentle knock on the doorframe. Zara stood there, her silver hair now streaked with premature white from the magical strain of helping so many wolves recover their true natures. Her mismatched eyes were bright with excitement. "Sorry to interrupt the domestic bliss," she said with a grin, "but we have visitors. The kind that make me want to bounce off the walls with excitement." "Good visitors or bad visitors?" Damon asked, automatically moving to position himself between his family and any potential threat. "The best kind," Zara assured him. "The delegation from the European Pax just arrived, and they brought someone very special with them." Celine's eyebrows rose. The European integration had been slower than in North America, partly because some of the old bloodlines there were even more entrenched in traditional hierarchies. If they were sending a delegation to Silvermoon Sanctuary, it meant something significant was happening. "Kiki, Luna, come down please," Celine called to her floating children. "We have guests." The children settled gently to the floor, their inherited powers allowing them perfect control despite their young ages. Kieran immediately straightened his small shoulders and lifted his chin, already showing the natural dignity that would serve him well as a future leader. "Do I need to be Prince Y?" he asked seriously. "Just be yourself, sweetheart," Celine said, smoothing down his unruly dark hair. "That's always been enough." They made their way to the sanctuary's main reception hall, where a small group of elegantly dressed wolves waited. But Celine's attention was immediately drawn to the elderly woman standing slightly apart from the others. Her hair was snow-white, her face lined with age, but her eyes, those silver starlight eyes, were unmistakably familiar. "Grandmother," Celine breathed, the word falling from her lips like a prayer. Celeste Silvermoon, former Luna Queen and Celine's paternal grandmother, stepped forward with tears streaming down her weathered face. "My darling girl. My precious granddaughter. I thought I'd lost you forever." The reunion that followed was everything Celine had dreamed of during those long, lonely years of not knowing who she really was. Her grandmother had been traveling in the remote European territories when the massacre happened, and by the time she returned, everyone believed the entire Silvermoon line had been eliminated. She'd spent 15 years in exile, building a resistance movement among the European Pax while searching for any trace of her lost family. "When we heard the stories about the new queen of the North American territories," Celeste said, holding Celine's face in her hands as if to memorize every feature, "when they described a silver-white wolf with starlight eyes who could commune with Moonstone, I dared to hope." "I have so much to tell you," Celine said through her tears. "So much I don't understand about our heritage, about the powers." "And I have stories to share," her grandmother replied warmly. "Stories about your parents, about the old days before fear divided our people." Her gaze shifted to Kieran, who had been watching the emotional reunion with wide, solemn eyes. "But first, I'd like to meet my great-grandchildren." Kieran stepped forward with all the dignity his 5 years could muster. "I'm Kieran Alexander Blackthorn Silvermoon," he said formally, offering a perfect bow. "It's an honor to meet you, great-grandmother." Celeste's eyes widened as she took in the boy's impossible golden eyes, the way power seemed to shimmer around him like heat waves. "By the ancient moon," she whispered. "He's not just a bridge walker. He's the moonchild from the oldest prophecies. The one who will unite not just our world, but all the hidden realms." "Hidden realms?" Damon asked sharply, his protective instincts flaring. "The supernatural world is much larger than just werewolves and the occasional hybrid," Celeste explained, her gaze never leaving Kieran. "There are realms of magic that have been sealed away for centuries, fey courts, dragon enclaves, phoenix settlements. All waiting for the one who can safely bridge the gaps between worlds." She smiled at the little boy who was now trying to coax Luna into performing tricks for their new great-grandmother. "I believe we found him." Over the following days, as the European delegation settled into the sanctuary, Celine learned more about her family's history than she'd ever imagined possible. Her grandmother brought photo albums that had survived the massacre, filled with images of parents she'd barely remembered, of herself as a laughing toddler surrounded by the love of an entire pack. "Your mother could sing flowers into bloom," Celeste told her one evening as they sat in the sanctuary's garden, watching Kieran and Luna play with a group of human and werewolf children. "Your father could speak with the spirits of our ancestors. And you, my dear one, inherited both gifts and more." "I still don't understand all of it," Celine admitted. "Sometimes I feel like there's so much power inside me that I don't know what to do with it." "Power isn't meant to be hoarded," her grandmother said gently. "It's meant to be shared, to lift others up, to heal the wounds that fear and hatred have left on our world." She gestured toward the playing children. "Look what you've already accomplished." Human children playing alongside werewolf pups, former enemies becoming friends, suppressed wolves discovering their true strength. "This sanctuary isn't just a home, it's a symbol of hope." It was true. In the 5 years since the battle at Brooklyn Bridge, Silvermoon Sanctuary had grown from a small safe house to a thriving community. Former Omegas who had discovered they were actually suppressed alphas now served as counselors and teachers. Human families who had been touched by Kieran's bridge-walking abilities brought their children to play and learn alongside supernatural youngsters. Scientists and mystics worked together to understand the new reality they were all creating. Damon's governmental reforms had spread beyond the North American territories as well. The brutal pack hierarchies that had once seemed immutable were giving way to systems based on merit, compassion, and mutual respect. It wasn't a perfect world yet, change never came easily, but it was a better one. "Mama. Mama, look what I can do." Kieran's excited voice drew Celine's attention back to the garden, where her son was demonstrating his latest ability to an audience of fascinated children. With intense concentration, he placed his small hands on a withered rosebush that the gardeners had been planning to remove. Golden light flowed from his fingers into the dying plant, and before their eyes, it began to bloom again. Not just bloom, it flourished, growing taller and stronger than it had ever been, covered in roses of every color imaginable. "He's not just healing it," one of the human children observed with scientific curiosity. "He's making it better than it was before." "That's what bridge walkers do," Luna announced proudly, clapping her chubby hands as violet sparkles danced around her fingers. "They make everything better." "Out of the mouths of babes," Celeste murmured, but her voice was filled with wonder. That evening, after the children were finally asleep, a process that required 3 bedtime stories, 2 lullabies, and a solemn promise from Kieran that he wouldn't try to astral project to the playground during the night, Celine and Damon sat on their balcony, looking out over the sanctuary grounds. "Do you ever miss it?" Celine asked softly. "The simple life, when the biggest worry was whether the council would approve your proposed law changes?" Damon laughed, pulling her closer against his side. "Are you joking? I was miserable before I found you. Lonely, going through the motions of being a king without understanding what leadership really meant." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Now I wake up every morning knowing that what we do matters. That we're building something that will make the world better for our children and their children. Even when our 5-year-old accidentally opens portals to parallel dimensions during temper tantrums." "Especially then," Damon said solemnly. "Shows character." Their quiet laughter was interrupted by a soft sound from the baby monitor, not crying, but the gentle murmur of Luna talking to herself in her crib. They listened fondly as their daughter chattered away in a mixture of real words and baby babble, occasionally punctuated by what sounded suspiciously like spells in languages that shouldn't exist yet. "She's going to be even more powerful than Kieran, isn't she?" Celine said with maternal pride and just a touch of trepidation. "Different kind of powerful," Damon replied thoughtfully. "Kieran builds bridges between what exists. Luna. I think Luna creates entirely new possibilities." As if summoned by their conversation, Kieran appeared in their doorway, padding barefoot across the balcony in his pajamas. "Can't sleep," he announced, climbing into Celine's lap with the easy confidence of a child who had never doubted his welcome. "Bad dreams?" Damon asked, smoothing down their son's perpetually messy hair. "No, good dreams," Kieran said, settling against his mother's chest with a contented sigh. I dreamed about tomorrow. There's going to be a lady with wings who comes to visit, and she's scared because she thinks we won't like her because she's different. But I told her in the dream that different is just another word for special. Celine and Damon exchanged glances over their son's head. Kieran's prophetic dreams had started about a year ago, and they were invariably accurate. If he said someone with wings was coming tomorrow, then someone with wings was definitely coming tomorrow. Did the lady say what kind of wings? Celine asked gently. Pretty ones, Kieran said sleepily. Like butterflies but bigger. And she has a little boy who can make music that changes colors. He yawned, his golden eyes already starting to drift closed. I think they'll like the sanctuary. Everyone likes the sanctuary. That's because the sanctuary is full of love, Celine murmured, holding her son close as his breathing deepened into sleep. And love makes everything feel safe. Above them, the moon shone down with gentle silver light, no longer the blood-red orb of conflict and change, but the eternal guardian it had always been meant to be. In the distance, the lights of the human city twinkled alongside the softer glows of supernatural dwellings, two worlds learning to exist in harmony. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new visitors, new opportunities to build bridges between divided peoples. There would be political complications to navigate, prejudices to overcome, and the constant delicate work of maintaining peace between groups that had been enemies for centuries. But tonight, in this moment, there was just a family sitting together under the stars, a sanctuary full of sleeping children who didn't see differences as threats but as gifts, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that love really could change the world. In his sleep, Kieran smiled and murmured something about rainbow bridges and flying horses. In her crib, Luna giggled and summoned tiny violet butterflies that danced around her nightlight before dissolving into sparkles of pure joy. And in the garden below, the roses that Kieran had healed earlier continued to bloom, their impossible array of colors glowing softly in the moonlight, a living symbol of what happened when someone chose to make things better instead of just accepting them as they were. The future stretched out before them, bright with infinite possibility, built on the foundation of two people who had been brave enough to choose love over fear, hope over cynicism, and unity over division. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but it was theirs, and it was beautiful, and it was enough.